the notion of working with the balance sheet and systematically implementing projects that may cost a little more upfront, but then offer permanent savings and creating systems that drive that continuously over time, to me is the only way we solve this. The reason I formed Moonshot is the places that need that the most are the ones without help are least able to access it. They don't have the time or wherewithal to implement the projects that would put their utility in a sustainable path. And we have to do that at every size. The ones that are less resourced are the ones that need it the most, but all utilities need it.
Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we dive into the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of water. I'm your host, Isaac Pellerin, and alongside my co-host, Megan Glover, the founder of 120 Water, we bring you insights from hundreds of incredible conversations we've had over the past 9 years with inspiring and energizing leaders in the water industry. Each week, we share those stories and conversations with entrepreneurs, community champions, and innovators who are making water work for everyone. Whether you're a water professional, a curious innovator, or simply passionate about our most precious resource, this podcast is for you. Let's get started.
Well, welcome everyone to today's podcast, the Make Water Work podcast, where Isaac and I talk to the innovators of water and celebrate the people that are making water work every single day. So who do we have on the podcast today, Isaac?
We have George Hawkins, who is certainly no stranger to the water industry, and one of the folks who had such a big impact on me early on in my time here at 120, because of the way he framed how utilities need to think about innovation and the value of investing in things, even when it's hard, and doing that in a way that brings the community along. And so there's so much value I know we're going to get out of this conversation. And, George was the general manager at DC Water and now has launched Moonshot Missions. And it's going to be exciting to get hear from George on how life has been going. So George, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nick. Megan, it is so delightful to be here. I remember the day when you kicked off, I don't think it was called 120 Water back then. Remember that?
120 Water Audit.
Yes. And we were in a little room. I think it was at
Ace.
I don't remember, but I remember being there and thinking, this is going to go somewhere. But the idea that I may have contributed a bit is great. I certainly have learned watching you, because nobody warned me how hard it is to do a startup. But I've watched the evolution of yours and how successful it's been. Bless you all because of the content of the work and how successful. But watching that arc has been very helpful to me.
Yeah.
So both of you have been I've been looking at you as that's the mountaintop I want to achieve. So I'm grateful, glad to be here with you both today.
It's wonderful to have you. And I knew, once you kind of took that leap into entrepreneurship, we always knew you were going to be successful because you were solving a massive problem. And I think that's just at the heart of what makes entrepreneurs just so passionate and businesses successful, is when you find a massive problem to solve. It's really hard for that not to be successful if you have someone at your leadership level at the helm. So George, it is an honor to have you on the podcast.
Delighted to be here.
We love asking every guest that comes on the podcast. Everyone has a story about how water found them. And so, George, how did water find you?
It's found me continuously and off through my lifetime, but it started when I was in elementary school. I went to an elementary school. We took a bus trip, and it went down the hill into the city and down a second hill down to what's called the Flats. And when we got off the bus, it had been sunny when we left that day. And when we got off the bus, it was cloudy.
Yeah.
And I asked the bus driver what the smell was in the air. And he tapped me on the head, this big guy. I was a little elementary school kid. He goes, "My son, that's the sweet smell of success." Because I was standing down on the flats in Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up in Cleveland Heights. Fairfax Elementary School. We went down there and we toured the flats, gigantic mills. This was when Cleveland was an economic powerhouse. Carnegie, Rockefeller, they all started in Cleveland. Most people don't know that. The consequence was you could not see from one corner of a street to the next because of the air pollutants. Or I walked down to the river and it looked like an old finger painting, like we would make as kids, because there was so much pollutants in that river. It wasn't really a river anymore. And as you know, actually, it was about 2 months after we visited, a train going by, spark from the train wheel, ignited the river on fire, which was the seventh time it burned in the 60s.
Wow.
Gosh.
And what I love about that origin story is we went back and we were elementary school kids. And back then you would write on the wide paper with the big pencils.
Mm-hmm.
We all wrote letters to President Nixon, all saying this has got to change. You didn't have to be highly educated. You knew this is not right. This should not stand. And I think the Clean Water Act was not that long after that. Yeah, a few years later and thereafter. And water just kept on coming up. The bigger question, of course, is the whole ecosystem. But sort of like measure your health and well-being by taking your blood. The best way to tell the health, in my view, of health and well-being of a place is looking at their
Ooh.
water.
I
Yeah.
love
And you
that.
tell so much more. It's almost like a balance sheet. That's the ecological balance sheet of the
Mhm.
place. So I've loved being water, not only because of water, but because of what it represents for the
Oh my
health of
gosh,
an
yeah.
entire system.
I love that. And it's that theme of water being at the core of economic development, health, like that ecosystem building definitely has come out as a theme on the podcast. And I think that's a really wonderful theme that we're hearing. And I love how you articulated that in particular,
Yeah.
George.
And it's also the thing where people, as utility leaders, need to do a good job of telling the story of the impact of the water quality and, to get that investment. And I think that's one of the things when I think about any time I've heard you talk about your time at DC Water, I'd love for you to talk about how you approached innovation and communication with the public.
Sure. And I love that question because this is a virtue that most water utilities for a long time were run by engineering folks who understood how the systems work. And of course you need that. That's a really powerful and profound asset and experience. But what they weren't oriented towards was telling the story of what they were doing to others. And in some ways, it almost felt it was a virtual, the better we do and no one knows us, that means we're really good at it. Because people turn on the water, they flush the toilet or whatever, and they don't even think. That's only if we do our job right. So there was some virtue there. The challenge is almost everything about water, at least as I faced it at DC Water when I joined it, was in the term of cost. This is an expense. This is a rate increase. This is a challenge. This is a burden. Because that's all people heard, is the only thing they would hear from their water utility was a bill and if it were going up, as opposed to any of the benefits that was driven. And I believe that an investment in water, and the U.S. Water Alliance came out with a report today indicating once again that an investment in water, of course, it's ecological benefit. There's no business, there's no job, there's no place that can have any kind of vitality on a community, public health, or economic basis without this as a foundation. And what I wanted to present to our ratepayers in DC, that's a tough rate-paying group, is the value proposition. I always said the dollar, I want you to believe, I can prove it to you, that the dollar you invest in DC Water is the best dollar you're going to spend this year because of all of the things that come from it. And in DC, we saw that the cleanup of the Anacostia, the continued cleanup of the Potomac, the revitalization of both waterfronts, the economic growth that has come, as well as the improvements to the natural ecosystem in the Chesapeake Bay. The multiple benefits are sort of extraordinary. But that's a story that needs to be told. I'll tell you one last thing. I always loved it when there was these surveys that would say, well, people don't want to pay more for water. And they're sort of lamenting that reality. I'm like, well, of course, that's what they're going to say. Someone calls me on the phone and asks me if I want to pay more for a hamburger. My answer is going to be no. Why would I say yes to that? Unless I know why I want to pay. I've been given a value proposition. I'm paying more for that burger because it's bigger, it's better, whatever. There's got to be an explanation for the cost increase, not just increasing prices. And that means you have to have a relationship with your customer and hope that they understand when there are rate increases, and it's inevitable in the water sector, given age and new contaminants and all the rest, that they understand what they're investing in. And that depends on them knowing who you are and hopefully liking what you're doing and enjoying the outcomes.
Yeah. George, I don't know this question. We're going off a little bit script, but how did you aspire? But it was general manager of a very large utility and municipality on your professional development card. How did you actually end up?
No, not in the slightest. I was running, prior to being at DC Water, I was running at the Division Department of Energy and Environment, which I was the first director. I did all the energy work in the city, and it was a fascinating agency because DC is a city, a county, and a state. So there's no other position where you had full span of control. We would write a state plan, a county implementation, and we'd send out the inspectors. And one day I was at DC City Hall, loving the job, put all my people in place, and I got pulled into a stairwell by the city administrator. That's note to self. That's good things happen in stairwells. And he said the mayor really dislikes DC WASA. That is what it was known, and was not known for customer service. Didn't have good people. It just was the old-fashioned version of the mayor had been a ward-based council member and really disliked the customer service. That he says the mayor wants you to apply to be GM of DC Water. It's authority, so he could not appoint me. And at the time, I thought it was the worst idea I had ever heard. It was not only not on my career. I'm like, what would I do running a big water utility? I know their permits, I know their consent decrees. Otherwise, the rest of that is, but as I thought about it, I completely changed my mind first of all, given the mayor wanted me to do it, I didn't have a lot of options.
Right. You were
I was
voluntold.
like, gosh, we were trying to cobble together $1 million for green infrastructure in DC from my old agency. DC Water has hundreds of millions of dollars in its capital budget. It's connected to every development in the city. If it changes course to do some of these things, it can do it at a scale that I never even imagined. So then I knew I had a big change, which is sort of to the innovation question. There was a big change that I felt needed to come to DC WASA, but the opportunity was enormous. So when I got to that point, then I couldn't wait. I was really excited about it.
Man, there's a whole thread of questions, a whole line of questions that I could follow up with. It kind of triggers this thought for me of, you always talk about, whenever I've heard you speak about the amount of power that a water utility consumes. And I'm curious, just in everything you were talking about with like energy and those kind of things, how you saw that investment in being able to say like, hey, we can optimize power consumption and
invest in green space
and understand the ecosystem of both how power and water work together.
Absolutely. What I did when I came in, so I remember it was very early in my tenure. I met with our CFO at the time, Olu, and he showed me our capital budget. And even though we're starting with the hundreds of millions, it was going up by 50 to 100 million for 5 straight years. I was like, are you kidding me? Each year, we're going to have to raise $50 to $100 million more than the year before, with a populace that at the time didn't like us. So we knew we had to start reducing costs and telling a story to our customers that would put them in the mindset of being willing to accept that kind of rate increase. Because what happens with the utility, if they don't get rate increases and they have mandated work that must be done, almost all of that rate increase was for regulatory required mandated work, is you skimp on everything else.
Yeah.
And that's the maintenance of the water systems. That's replacements of drinking water lines. All the things that people see and feel out in the system don't get investment because you have to do the permit work. So we knew we had to raise those funds. And so I just looked at the balance sheet. If we are going to reduce costs at DC Water, where are we spending all our money? First was personnel. Second was debt service. And third was power. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had not really contemplated that at the time we had a $37 million annual power budget at DC Water, because water and wastewater is so heavy.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it takes so much power to move it.
It's a lot of energy.
I hired someone. I think one of the first utilities in the country. We hired a full-time energy professional from Pepco, or from our power company, to come in and provide immediate, full-time, daily service about every way we could save on power. which was one of the best ways. And by the way, what I do now is take that same message, finding ways that you can improve your performance. In our case, cut carbon emissions, improve resiliency, all sorts of things came from it. But the bottom line was it also improved our balance sheet. We ended up with a utility that had a more revenue than it did when we started these projects. They were cash flow positive. That's like the sun coming up for a utility.
Yeah.
And every single utility can do it. And in my view, every single utility should be doing it because it's one of the few areas where you put some time into it, you put some investments in, it will pay you back plus some.
Yeah.
And heck, that's a great place for any utility to start.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So, and I just love the fact that we're talking about balance sheets and utilities in the same conversation. That's so refreshing. So you alluded to the what you're doing now. So I want to make sure we spend a lot of time on this because it's super important work and that we want to talk about. So Moonshot Missions. What compelled you to start this, George? I mean, you could have done anything after DC, but yet you chose to join the crazies and start your own entity. But what compelled you to start Moonshot?
What compelled me was telling the DC Water story. So I was able, and by the way, most of the things we did at DC Water was not things that I brought. What I was able to do was assemble a great team. I always felt I was the conductor of an excellent jazz band. I think of every organization.
Great leadership tip.
And I don't play the instruments. They all play their instruments beautifully. And I'm going to ask each one to stand up and improvise and sort of solo for a while and then sit back down and stay on the same tune. And when you're great musicians in a jazz band, you can make beautiful music. And so DC Water did a lot on everything: finance, procurement, personnel, operations, all of it, because of the team I was able to recruit and retain. And I tell that story. And what I constantly heard was I would have folks from the audience come up to me afterwards and say, "That's a great story. You tell with entertaining little bits and pieces of what happened here and there. But guess it has no relationship to us. You had billion plus Totex budget. You had all engineers. Every company wanted to work with you. I've got 20 employees. I should have 30. I have an operating deficit. There's a debt cap in my community. I'm holding on, just holding on. I'm doing what I have to do to deliver this service every day. Our people are multitasking and we're responding to things. But the idea I have the chance to step back and look at our energy consumption and start evaluating various ways to where would that time come from? Where would the money come from if we did find something? Where would the people? I just don't have any of it. And I heard it all the time.
Yeah.
And I felt that, Megan, when you said it was an unmet need, I was like, and it was not just a few. These are hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of communities that are struggling. I was like, that's a need. And it's not being met because wonderful engineering consulting firms don't generally go into that market because there's no money to be made.
No.
Why is there no money to be made? Because they have no money to spend. That's the problem. So I was like, that needs an answer. Now, and interesting, Megan, at exactly the same time I started thinking about that. Gosh, this is a problem. I keep hearing it. What needs to be done? Dave Henderson at XPV Water Partners asked me to write an essay called Moonshot. That's where the name came from.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh my God.
And the question he asked in the essay is, what is stopping public agencies from implementing more technical solutions? We have all these technologies and software that improve services, reduce costs, all these great outcomes, and they're not being adopted very readily. Why? What's the reason? And what would be your moonshot to overcome those obstacles? So I never really systematically sat down and thought about it, but it's a world that you faced running a service, selling to a utility. And I outlined in all this paper what a tech firm will say when they have this great new product that's going to reduce costs and all the rest is it's from when it's already been implemented and understood and trained. Okay, now your costs are going to go down and your performance. What they don't show is all the steps a utility has to take to get there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And all of those steps take additional time and money that is very hard for a utility to find, particularly if they're low resources. So the problem were all the steps leading to the innovation, not the innovation. And the moonshot was, well, what enterprise would be helpful to sort of supplement a local's capabilities to overcome those steps so they could get to innovation. By the way, and a little bit of humor, the first time they printed that essay, it's on the Moonshot website. He misprinted it, and it was misprinted as Moonshit.
That's so good.
Nice big glossy book, and there it was, the Moonshit essay.
What did he really
by
think of
George
that
Hawkins.
essay, huh, George?
You know, drinking
But
water,
it was-
wastewater, it still kind of works.
Yeah, I did. I loved it. Got
Yeah.
humor from it. The other element that connected to that and leads to the Moonshot Missions as a 501c3, it's designed to help communities assess, identify, procure, and implement innovations. And talk about balance sheet. We'll help solve any problem that we find when we connect with the utility. But our goal is not just to solve a problem,
Mhm.
because if there's an underlying financial mismatch, that is just kicking the can down to the next problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our goal is to find they'll solve the problem that helps build trust. Now you have a relationship. So now what are the projects you could undertake that would improve your performance and improve your balance sheet? So you fundamentally have a different financial picture going forward.
Mhm.
That's the moonshot, not
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
project,
Mhm.
but a scheme and a route.
Yeah.
And what is amazing is it's been working really well. What no one warned me, both of you, is how hard a startup is. I mean, I had a piece of paper. I wrote the essay. Here's how we would start. We sat in our living room, and we're going to start Moonshot. And I left DC Water having no idea
Yeah.
Yeah.
what it takes to do what you've done. And it's hard, because when we hired people are like, well, wait, we don't have personnel rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Workers'
me.
compensation filings. What workers' comp filings? And we have now. I need a finance system that can allocate costs from people to various and building all that. And your plane is flying, and your engine is sort of on fire. You're trying to put it out and put in a good engine all at the same time. It is exciting, but it's also it's an incredible challenge that you all as entrepreneurs do sort of instinctively. And it's not that I didn't respect entrepreneurs. I just had never done it myself. So I've run big agencies. I had personnel offices and procurement of all those things. So yes, we had to make them more efficient and do change. But those things, I need to hire someone. Someone say, okay,
Yeah.
they go off
Yeah.
and do it. Now I want to hire someone. Everyone's looking at each other like, who's good? Oh,
Oh.
wait, that's us.
Yeah. So now I'm curious then, George, how, as an entrepreneur starting a new company, how have you found procurement and customer adoption as an entrepreneur and owning your own company? How's that been for you?
I will try not to overstate this, but I think the general public approach to procurement is an abomination. We have had communities that want to hire us, where I know people there, and it takes them a year. We just had a RFP that we responded to. I don't know whether we'll be selected, but it's an entity we know. And we were told, well, glad you submitted. We'll be reviewing. We'll let you know what's likely to happen in a year. And what agency that is building like ours? I'm impressed that you were able to survive that gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And that's happened to us over and over and over again. Another state agent, that was a utility. A state agency is wanted to hire us to do TA work. I've got a great team. We're good at what we do. We deliver
Wonderful team.
results.
Yeah.
And again, it took almost a year for them to get us under procurement. I think that's outrageous. It's not only that it's almost impossible for small organizations like ours, and yours not small anymore, but to grow when you got to put all that money and time in up front and wait a year to make any revenue in return. All this help of small businesses and otherwise, it's the system of delay. And then when I look at what the requirements are, they become so overblown. And I'm a public sector guy. Of course, public money needs to be spent well.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think we have a reckoning in this country that we've made it so difficult that we actually spend more money, more public money. I think of not only our time, but all of the public sector positions in the utilities or the states or the feds who are spending all of their time going through all these new steps over and over and over again. How much transaction costs, which is interesting to me because one of the things we did at DC Water and we encourage at Moonshot is to look at system costs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We did this at DC Water. A meter, the clean water, the meter turns. That's your beginning of your cash register. And at some point at the end, $1 comes into your cash register. The question we asked, and this is a Moonshot issue we take to the utilities we work with, is do you know how much of the dollar that came in your cash register you spent getting the dollar? And what I found at DC Water shocked me. It was 30 cents, 30% because of all the steps in procurement and this, that, and the other. And when we started reducing those costs by becoming systematically more efficient, it's like a rate increase without a rate increase. And that's what every utility can do. And what I haven't figured out exactly how to do this. I know inside an agency, I know what they can do. We have a whole series of things to make an agency more efficient and effective that drives change in cost reduction, things your customers will love from. But the folks that we submit to, I think we have a reckoning. I'm really shocked at how hard it is to do the public work and how much money is spent just on the transaction, not the work itself.
I mean, that is fascinating to think about, gross margin as it comes to water. And if we just improve the gross margin of the product, how much better off would our utilities be? So if you say you started a baseline of 30, like where do you think it reasonably could go, George? Like what do you think is an appropriate kind of margin on that dollar of water?
I think, reduced it to 10%.
Reduced it to 10%? Yeah.
And I don't know what I always figured that I want 8. I mean, that's where you were constantly striving to get better. Another quick one is when a part broke and when it was delivered. We found when we looked at it, and here's the issue for most utilities, is nobody looks at it across the system. Your finance office is getting more efficient on finance. Your procurement office is getting more. Each piece of the agency may get more efficient. But there's very few folks that look across, and it was across where most of the time was lost. The handoffs from when procurement's finished, now let's go back to finance. Well, now finance is going to send it back over to legal. Then legal, all these handoffs is where, and when we really started making efficiency is when we looked at that as a system. That's rarely done. And that's where tremendous improvements and efficiencies can be gained, which guess what? The utility gets to reinvest.
Right. That's real money.
All the things. And then you get this momentum going. And that's what happened at DC Water. Once the momentum started, I'll tell you another quick, I'm sort of rambling on, but the question in Moonshot Delivers is how to create systems and utilities that drive continuous change, not just a project. And I'll give you an example. At DC Water, and any utility can do this, when there's a capital project that comes up of whatever size, so scale is less important, do you ask the question of return on investment or system program lifecycle costs? Usually the answer in the past has been no. You're looking for low cost bid. And what we found is we required business plans for capital projects that had life cycle costs and return on investment. It completely changed how we invested our money. And we started generating returns. Here was the next question. So I had one of my best division directors came in and said, well, I've done all these projects that saved money. You know what you did to me? You just cut my budget. So what incentive do I have other than the pat on the back that we did a good job? So we created a clawback that if you save $100 on your project, you get to keep 15 in your budget for a project of your choice, not the headquarters, not front office choice. That created an internal incentive in order, and all of a sudden, every division director was, I want to have that money. I wanted to do this forever. I want to do that forever. And again, those are system changes any utility could put in place. That's their scale that start driving change because of the way the system works, rather than the way the system often works now, which is inhibiting change. It's so hard to try something new and to procure something new. And do they have the resources to do it? Moonshot helps with that question, but we would like to help a utility adopt some of these systems. And then they're off. They're like, we taught how to fish and they're now fishing and going forth and we can move to the next place. It's exciting cycle, but it's possible. We can do this.
Yeah.
And the question is how.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier before the podcast when Megan and I were just excited to have you on about the innovation around process was also in procurement, and that aspect of Megan was telling a story, and I'll let you tell it, but just of the way you surround yourself with people.
I just remember, George, a comment. I think you made this. I don't think I dreamt it, that you said you purposely sat procurement near your office. But I mean, just, anecdotally, like, be close to the solution, right? But then you also shared in the pre-show some of the very cool things that maybe Moonshot is trying to do around that issue and be part of that solution that I agree with you is absolutely broken. It's inhibiting any sort of innovation. And honestly, it's killing small business. Like, why start a business in water if you're not going to be able to, generate revenue and hire great people and all of the things that you need just to build a great business? So, are you able to share a little bit about how Moonshot is kind of solving that?
It's a great question. Some of the instrumental, I hired a full-time external affairs officer who started building our communications team. I hired a full-time energy officer because that was the third highest cost on our balance sheet. You had to save money, look at where the money's being spent. Third is I hired an innovations chief. That was Sudhir Murthy, who just started driving what the innovation should be. My job was how can we make it happen? His was, well, what should it be? And the third is I hired a procurement chief, which we didn't have before. And I sat up 2 doors away from him.
Okay, see.
Yep.
And I wanted him to come, and I would check in with him not every day, but all the time. What's going on? What's the problem? What are the holdup? And we found that our procurement rules were inhibiting a lot of the innovations that we wanted to achieve, like paying far more upfront, but knowing that it was a permanent cash flow positive project. Was there a way doing a design build operate, the kind of thing we did with thermal hydrolysis? So we ended up completely rewriting our procurement manual from start to finish. And the idea of doing a clawback or awards to employees for innovations, that meant personnel rules that encouraged. So we made modifications to our personnel rules. So there was a whole budgeting. This whole question of requiring a business plan was something we changed the capital budgeting process. So we had changes that we encouraged in procurement, in personnel, and in budgeting, the scheme of which started generating the projects we sought. And they weren't coming from us. They were coming from the system. And once that starts happening, then your challenge is a really fun one, which is, of all the things that are coming, which ones should we do? Because it turned out we were getting more than we could handle. But that's a great problem to have. All of those changes, and for lack of a better phrase, at Moonshot, we call that utility performance management, UPM. And we have models for what we would seek. And we're just about to launch a project in the Great Lakes where we're going to systematically be building those tools. But one of the things I've realized is how to make sure they're customized or sized to smaller, less resourced utilities. Because one of the things I was able to do at DC Water is I had a whole legal team. I had all these people. The same tool that worked at a DC Water scale won't work in a smaller community in anywhere in the country. So we've got some work to do to make sure we scale it to the audience that we seek. And it probably are going to be starting with one or two things rather than the full suite. But what I found at DC Water is once you get momentum, and we went to a utility in the Midwest, helping them with innovation on technology. That was the question. And this is the other point that Moonshot focuses on. I don't believe we have a what problem in the water sector. If you go to WEFTEC or ACE or any of these, there's a horde of innovations that are out there ready to be implemented. The what is and it's not hard. The local people we work with are so smart and hardworking. They just don't have the time. It's not hard for an organization like mine with experienced folks to go in and say, here's 5 things you could do. That's the what. Where we find most of the challenges are, and this scales to every utility of size, is the how. I've got union issues. I've got personnel who are suspicious that this change is going to take their job away or have them do something they don't know how to do. I know at DC Water this was true. The maintenance crews and the engineering crews, maintenance felt that engineering was engineering stuff that maintenance didn't understand or didn't ask maintenance, and engineering felt that maintenance was and that had been going on for decades.
Typical interpersonal conflict.
And Moonshot spends as much time, if not more, on not the what, because that's actually not the thing about a utility that hasn't had a lot of innovation is there's a lot of what I would call low-hanging whats. There's a lot of things again, they're great people working hard, they just haven't had the time or money to implement. So figuring out what's are not hard. How an organization with limited resources can adopt something new. What kind of work do we need to do with your personnel before you do any innovation so that they are encouraged, not failing? Like I would say, let's have innovation be with and for your people, not to and at them. And all too often, innovation is in that second category. The folks, first time they hear of it is when someone walks in and say, "Oh, we're changing this way we do things," and the team has never been asked their opinion, have never been a part of the process, and I feel like something's being imposed on them that they don't understand. That's gonna fail, or at least be slow and challenging every single time, and that's an own goal. We did that to ourselves. We can do that right. And Moonshot spends a lot of time with the utility on the ground. We start with operators. I've got a whole slew of really highly trained operators on our team. We want to make sure the operations staff are heard and listened to. We call it humble listening before we go to any solution finding. And it's amazing the doors that opens.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My gosh.
That's one of the points that you just made was one of those early messages that I read an essay that you wrote shortly after I started at 120, where you were talking about how innovators like 120 Water, it's annoying to have someone like us come in and say, "Hey, you need a smart technology," instead of saying, "Hey, it's the people that are smart." And we don't message that we're smart. We message that our technology helps you be digital about it, maybe helps you get some efficiencies, but the people that you hire, the people around the room at a utility are smart, capable problem solvers. And as good as our software is, it never can dig a hole or put a shovel in the dirt. It can only help you make some marginal improvements and insights, and hopefully help you work better. And I think you now on the flip side get to do that same experience where you honor the fact that the people that you work with are smart problem solvers. It's more about sequence, having some structure to think about implementation, more than it is
The actual technology.
yeah,
itself.
more than it is about
Yeah.
like, well, you need all these technologies.
Yeah.
I would say two things. One is I always admired from the very beginning when I know it wasn't the very beginning, but for me, early on in your evolution as a company, I felt you were really good listeners and you were understanding what the challenge was that you were overcoming. And you started there, not with, "I'm coming in, I'm smarter than you, and I've got something that," no, here's a challenge that we know you have. We've listened and heard, we'll listen to your team, but we have some thoughts about how to help you overcome a challenge that you have. I thought you did that really well. But the imperative on this it could not be more fundamental. I believe no matter what funding there is, obviously administrations have changed and all the rest, and was there, yes, that matters. But ultimately, I think it doesn't matter. No matter what the level of federal funding, it's not enough. The capital short fund, I've seen numbers from 90 billion to 110 billion a year capital shortfall. That's for known projects. What I found at DC Waters, there was another 100 billion in projects that wasn't on our list yet because we hadn't looked.
Yeah.
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 I think the notion of what that number is huge. And if we just keep doing what we've always done, we fail because we don't have enough revenue. The notion of working with the balance sheet and systematically implementing projects that may cost a little more upfront, but then offer permanent savings and creating systems that drive that continuously over time, to me is the only way we solve this. And that becomes, and here's the great reason I formed, great is the wrong word, but the reason I formed Moonshot is the places that need that the most are the ones without help are least able to access it. Not because they aren't hardworking, they're amazing people given what they do. I run the backhoe, I send out the bills, my wife's sitting over there and they're multitasking every day. It's just they don't have the time or wherewithal to implement the projects that would put their utility in a sustainable path. And we have to do that at every size. The ones that are less resourced are the ones that need it the most, but all utilities need it. And I know at DC Water every year, I told this story, we changed the way we presented our case to ratepayers. And I felt I had 2 cases I had to make to a ratepayer, and did it personally in 65 rate hearings while I was there. And the first case was, can I prove to you that this year we are more efficient with your money than we were last year? It costs us less money to replace a lead service line. It costs us less money to replace a fire hydrant. It costs us less money to treat a gallon of wastewater because of the things we're doing on your behalf. And you should ask that and demand that of us every year, which requires the innovations I've been talking about. I've got to prove to our rate base that we're doing better this year than last year. That opens the door for the second conversation, which is, I do need more of your revenue. And I got to prove to you that there's value to you in the work we will do with that money. But you shouldn't even let me ask that question unless you know this is not a bloated public agency, all that stereotype being inefficient. No, I've just proven to you we're efficient. And by the way, we're going to come back next year and be even more efficient. The revenue that I need is for projects that make this city a better city. You know that flooding down by the river near your neighborhood? And by the way, in our capital project, one overlay, there's likelihood of failure and consequence of failure, sort of classic asset management. The other overlay is we need to do work in every neighborhood of the city so that everybody who's investing in us sees something visual and it's sort of connected to them that's benefiting. So we make sure every part of the city was benefiting from our capital program. So we could say, this money that we're asking for, that flooding problem down on Beach Road that you've had for the last 30 years, we're going to solve that. That's the kind of thing we're doing it. And people are like, oh, I get that. That makes a difference to me. So anyways, it's something that every utility, I think we fail as a sector if we don't systematically adopt the environmental, public health, and balance sheet projects. And the answer is we can. They exist. What question is how to systematically do it. And that's what Moonshot seeks to do with communities all over the country.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier too, this concept that I find as solution providers in the space, the biggest challenge is scaling a solution down. Like we love thinking about scale, like, oh, can this work in DC water? Can this work in Denver? But like, can you scale the offering or the solution or the pricing, the packaging to meet the need of the water utility that has 2.5 employees? And I think that's, I love that that's what Moonshot has done, is like saying, hey, let's take this and focus on scale, but can it scale to the lowest?
And we're not perfect at that yet. We're still working on that as well. Because many of the people at Moonshot, we've got an incredible roster of ex-CEOs, ex-chief engineers, operators, research scientists. Our view is when we read a utility, we can send someone to talk to someone at the utility at any level where it's a peer. So, because that opens the door automatically when an operator knows they're talking to an operator and they start having operator-like conversations. I can't do that. When talking to the GM or the board of directors, I could do that. But we want to be able to meet a utility in every place. But the challenge of how to scale big utility implementation to small utilities where personnel is usually we can find financing. Some of these have a return on investment that private financing is possible because you could share the savings with an investor and move quickly. The challenge is people that, oh gosh, I've got 2 operators. Who's going to be able to operate this? Well, that's a question we like because okay, here's a plan. But our notion, and I'll just quickly chart this out. We're building an agenda. I call it the +3 agenda, for lack of a better phrase. Do we think of a better one? But what are the 12 utilities are far more alike than they're different, with lift stations, pump stations. What are the 12 most common steps that a utility could take that will improve performance and save money? Those 2 requirements. Second, what is a streamlined assessment process, starting with this humble listening and then what we call collaborative ingenuity, of which of those 12 are relevant to any utility? We can get there pretty quickly. So there's 3. All right, now we've got a little agenda for your utility. Now the third is, how do we implement and scale the 3 solutions that will save you money, improve performance, and then get the finance? And our view is that process can be pretty quick. And like I said, because these are focused on return on investment projects, it's also subject to potential private funding, which can move much faster. We're going to save $100. Well, 20 of it are going to go back to the bank that funded this, and 80 are going to go to you, or whatever the split is. But as a result, you don't have to put up any of your rate revenue up front in case you have a debt cap or operating deficit. And what a story you have to tell. We had a utility that we helped, and we encouraged them, and they're now putting in a waste recovery system that's going to generate cash flow. It's going to all these good. And they went from being a utility being attacked in their community to doing a press conference with the congresswoman and the mayor about this whole new path they were taking. We weren't on the podium. We weren't even mentioned. We're in the background, sort of like cheering on. And they're off to the races. That's the moonshot. They're on their way. And that's what we would like to see. And is possible almost anywhere in the country.
Yeah. Well, George, I want to thank you. I mean, I knew, I obviously we're familiar with you and familiar with Moonshot and have an appreciation for what you're doing. But I will tell you this time with you have given me, like I said, you were meeting an unmet need. You're not only meeting an unmet need, but you're probably tackling the hardest thing to tackle in this industry at a macro level, which is systematic change. And getting us to think differently and appropriately about what we actually need to solve for in order to be more innovative, order for us to be more sustainable. And just thank you for allowing Moonshot to exist, to really tackle those, what I'm calling first mile issues, that if we don't tackle and solve in the industry, I worry what change we're actually going to be able to make. So.
Well, thank you both for having me. Like I said, I'm a huge admirer of not only what your company does, but how your company has tackled those same questions so successfully. Wow, blessings to you. And second, thank you for as well. Moonshotmissions.org is our website. People can see the scale and depth of the people we have. They're such good people. They
you
just
talked about. I'm so impressed with the people you know. Can you just kind of brag on your team for a minute?
Sure. We just hired someone on last Monday and the Monday before. The woman we hired got her training in Louisiana and it's been in 8 years helping small systems as an operator. The person we hired before that was running facilities in Milwaukee, waste facilities, and it started as a line operator and worked his way up. And both of them have always wanted to have a job where they get to help their peers in communities. And it's this great sense of worth in the work. It's amazing. And you look at our team, we've got class 4 drinking water, wastewater operators. We have research scientists at the PhD level who got their PhDs at wastewater and drinking water facilities. We've got engineering PEs, probably 15 PEs on the team. We've got a whole slew of ex-CEOs like Andy Cricken from Camden County, Michael Muka, Shannon Gordy, who ran Harrisburg, Capital Region Water. So we have folks that can communicate, but what binds us together is this great sense and love of the sector, desire to serve, and belief that we have a model here that isn't just solving a problem and kicking the can down the road. We can help solve it in a systems way, which actually could yield a sustainable outcome for this essential service that does buttress every single job and every single person in life form in any community. What's more important than that? So we love doing it. And like I said, I keep watching you guys so I can learn from the masters. But it's been a delight. I love the team and I love the work.
Yeah, well, we can't thank you enough for joining us. And thank you to all of you who tuned in and listened in. We love making this podcast. This has been so much fun to have conversations with amazing folks who make water work. And if you know of anyone else who makes water work and you want to hear from them, please shoot us a note and let us know who else you want to hear from. We love George, and George, if you have any guests, send them our way. We love like-minded folks who can challenge us to think better.
Absolutely. Like I said, I've known of and watched you since the very beginning, and I love the story arc. What you're doing is a blessing for the sector, and so anything I can do to be of service. And there are a lot of voices out there, so I'll be glad to help on that front.
Thanks, George.
Thanks.
I love George. He's always inspiring to talk to, and I love the insight. and the energy that he brings. What did you take away from that conversation?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so much. I mean, we could have multiple conversations with him about so many different topics, but I think just my further appreciation for what Moonshot is doing. And I think the ultimate problem that they're solving, which is the root cause of why innovation is so stagnant in water. And as I think about 120 water and where we've actually failed, it's on the change management component. We have failed to educate procurement. We have failed to educate all of the stakeholders around the change, the innovation, the adoption. And I think so much of that success in transforming an industry and bringing innovation into a stagnant industry starts with change management. I just love that Moonshot is addressing that for systems that need it the most.
Yeah.
That's what I took away.
Yeah, I love it. And that's a theme that I really have been thinking a lot too about, is that change management aspect. And to your point, like when you're working so fast, it can be easy to just say, well, I need to address the problem in front of me, instead of taking a step back and also saying, how can I modify the system that may have created the problem, or is this an opportunity to rewrite the system in a way that makes us better and gives us a better framework for decision making for the long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just love every time I get to talk to George. One, I mean, he sings our praises. It always feels good.
I know, right?
to talk to George when he starts with how much he admires us. But he's been a cheerleader for the industry, and for the way he is scaling down what they do is just it's just amazing. And I can't wait to watch the impact that they have.
Yeah. And I hope this gives more exposure to systems that aren't aware of Moonshot and what they're doing. I would definitely encourage any folks who are not aware of Moonshot to go check out their website. They are doing incredible work, and certainly go support them.
Yeah. There's no problem too big or too small that they won't take a look at.
That's right.
And thank you so much for joining us on the Make Water Work podcast. We love this opportunity to have conversations with folks like George, and we love hearing from you, hearing the impact that these conversations are having, or anyone that you want to hear from who you know makes water work. So send them our way, like, share, follow. It really helps us amplify this message. Thanks for listening to the Make Water Work podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message. Together, we can make water work for everyone.